Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Kodiak Shack podcast. Today I have Nicolas Chaillan, who's got a lot of awesome stuff going on, but first we'll do some admin. If you guys are interested in donating, the link will be in the show notes. Nick, go ahead and tell us about yourself and kind of how you ended up working in the DoD space.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm the former Chief Software Officer for the Air Force and Space Force. I was the first CSO in the U.S. government. Before that, I was the Special Advisor for Cyber and DevSecOps at OSD, and before that, I was the Chief Architect at DHS. But more importantly, I founded and created and sold 12 companies on the commercial side before working for the government. Of course, you can tell with my accent, I wasn't born in the United States. I was born in France and moved to the U.S. about 12 years ago. Became a U.S. citizen, actually, funny enough, a month before starting at DHS, because I actually was really eager to make a difference and come and do my best to bring value to the taxpayers and our nation. So I realized pretty quick I couldn't do it if I wasn't a citizen. So the minute after I became a citizen, we already had everything lined up for me to come at DHS. And for once, it only took 30 days, which is pretty good, right, for the government to get onboarded at DHS, and then move to DoD after that.
Well, that's great. Well, there's so many things I want to unpack with that. One, so just for people who don't really understand the CSO, so the Chief Software Officer, what does that entail? Like, what are you trying to achieve in that role?
Yeah, so the CSO role is really a new role that's designed to bring enterprise services to remove bottlenecks with the adoption of digital transformation, innovation, DevSecOps, which is kind of the software lifecycle of moving from development all the way to production multiple times a day instead of waiting, years to get there, and having the ability to get feedback rapidly from the warfighter, so we know what sticks, what works, what not to waste time on, and be more agile and efficient in spending taxpayer money. And so it's a massive enabler both of the cloud adoption. So we created the Cloud Office, Cloud One, and Platform One in DoD, which are the DevSecOps platform team, to really remove all those bottlenecks. And we had so many teams building their own DevSecOps stack in a vacuum, spending a year, dozens of meetings a year of funding to build all that automation to build software, so they can then focus on their mission software instead of directly focusing on their mission software, which is why they exist. And so by bringing this enterprise service of cloud and DevSecOps, we remove all these bottlenecks and vacuum driven work to accelerate the focus on the mission software, and more importantly, enable the release of software multiple times a day, all the way to SAP and weapon systems for something that used to be, maybe at best once a year to 5-year cycles, which actually increase, both safety, security, and of course, enables us to make sure we're not wasting taxpayer money after 5 years waking up and realizing we built something that nobody cares for, so.
Well, and that's something, as an end user, I was actually having a conversation with a friend yesterday who was kind of talking about just the detachment between the end user and then the engineers, and how little kind of communication there can be there. So what was your experience previously in how that communication happened between the development of programs and the end user feedback? And then how is that changing today?
Well, that's kind of part of the problem, when you do things in vacuums, in labs, in silos, often there were some representation of end users, although I would always argue that it wasn't really the actual end user, but more the leadership of the end user, which, usually means that it's not the actual people touching the weapon, right? And so it's not really the kind of feedback we really needed. And so with DevSecOps, though, you're able to continuously release, in production, and get that real-time feedback from the actual real warfighter, and that removes the bottleneck, that removes the disconnect between the development side and the production side, and more importantly, you don't have anything in the middle to prevent you from getting that feedback rapidly multiple times a day. So you end up saving, I think overall with 27 programs in the first year moving to DevSecOps, we saved 100 years of time. And I always tell people we didn't really save 100 years of time; we just didn't waste it. That's an interesting
Yeah.
difference. China and Russia are not waiting for us to figure it out. And so, when you look at the adoption of DevSecOps and the scale that's just in 1 year, it compounds over time. Overall, what we've seen is because of the ability to continuously accredit the software multiple times a day, we saved between 12 to 18 months of time per program per 5-year cycle. And then thanks to the rapid feedback between the warfighter and the development team, we saved an additional 12 to 18 months of time as well. So you compound that to about 3 years out of 5 years per program of time saved. So that's a massive amount of time on the schedule, but also on the funding side.
Yeah, well, and you think if you look at just other programs like, obviously I like airplanes, but if you're looking at the F-22 or really any program, we're talking 12, 15 years between the beginning of the development and the execution of it. So I can only imagine there's that same problem set in the kind of software development areas there. What was it like when you're obviously have developed companies in the private sector, and then you move into the DoD, and then now all of a sudden you realize there probably is a different world, I would assume. What was that experience like?
Yeah, it's very interesting, right? I guess serving in DoD was both the most frustrating and infuriating time in my career, but at the same time the most rewarding and the thing I miss the most. The value we ended up bringing, I hope to the nation and to our kids to have a fighting chance at winning against China 20 years from now is so important. But at the same time, you compare kind of the commercial world and the DoD, you're gonna find pretty much that everything is wrong. There's not much that's good. We feel pretty good about the amount of money we're spending. 800 billion a year, but I can tell you we probably waste 90 cents on the dollar. So by that I mean about 60 cents I'll spend on useless acquisition bureaucracy. That were created mostly to prevent fraud, all to end up wasting more money that it would waste in terms of actual fraud. And that's kind of the solution being worse than the problem. And then you're gonna see about 20 cents spent on the wrong things. Buying outdated capabilities that don't make sense because we were told to guess what we had to buy 5 years ahead, and so we're stuck in time because of the disastrous congressional funding process with Congress and kind of stuck in time 5 years ahead. Which really makes no sense. And then you're gonna see, about 10% not working out, and so you're left with 10% left. But on top of that, when I used to get a quote for any kind of work, what used to cost, let's say 50K on the commercial side, would cost $500,000 on the DoD side, and so you would see 10x cost, but you also see about 7x more time to do it. So not only you pay 10x, but you get it done 7 times slower, which is just mind-boggling when you compound all that over the time and over the billions we spent. So it's pretty scary. And then you're gonna find, of course, because of the size of the behemoth that is DoD, you're gonna find so many silos and egos and even when you have a good solution, I've seen it countless times where, for example, the team we created at Platform One created the largest implementation of Zero Trust, which is a new cyber, well, not that new, but 6 years old now, cyber principle. But I guess for DoD it's pretty new, right? And so now finally the DoD woke up, and after all of the leadership fighting me for years, telling me that they were not 100% sure if Zero Trust was the way forward. Now they decided it was time to do it, and now they are experts in Zero Trust, right? Because that's what they are overnight. And so those people, instead of reusing the work we've done at Platform One, which was the largest implementation of Zero Trust, we got it in production in 45 days on the end class side. After a year, we had it, across fabrics and designed to be running all the way to SAP, and completely capable of doing that from day one with very little money, about $2 million, and 12 people, which was the largest implementation of Zero Trust in the U.S. government at the time. And now, you see this, putting Booz Allen on contract, saying, "Hey, we're gonna try to create a second option," which is fine to have options, right? So they say we're gonna give them $12 million or whatever the funding is, and give them 6 months. And after 6 months, they're like, well, they couldn't deliver it, and so now we also realize that maybe we should have asked Booz Allen to do it not just on the N-class side, but also on the classified side. And maybe we should have thought that as one of the requirements, the software should be able to run on the high side. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty obvious. You should probably have done that from day one. You can't do Zero Trust and just have N-class stuff and no ability to do classified work. That's just common sense. And in fact, when we designed the Platform One Zero Trust stack, it was designed from day one to be capable of doing classified work. That's just obvious to anybody spending 5 minutes in the department. And so now they're going to give 18 months of time, additional to the 6 months, for Booz to come and fix their 6 months MVP that never even got deployed to production after 6 months, when we did it in 45 days. And now they're going to get 18 more months and more money and more time, all initially supposedly to create a backup solution in case the stuff we do wasn't good enough. But the fact is, it is, and it's in production and it works. On the contrary, their stuff is still not even up and running anywhere after what is now probably 10 months. And that's a good example, right, of the nonsense you see, driven either by inability to buy. I think that the acquisition, the waterfall process is still very much there. No ability to understand agility and agile, procurement. So we're buying, with a big prime, showing up with a turnkey solution, allegedly a big black box, versus what we did in Platform One. We had the government effectively be the prime integrator. Then we had 8 companies on contract. Not one company was responsible for the whole thing. So it was pretty much buying FTEs and people and spreading them and making sure that we could deliver the capability rapidly in an agile fashion, with the government being really the product owner and the integrator, and that's the way we should buy everything, right? The more we get stuck, the more we buy black boxes, the more we have these massive contracts, the less agile you become, and the more locked in you become to a single company.
So I have so many questions there. So with the so first we'll tackle the, you kind of talked about a little bit, the contracting side of it, but why does it seem that the moment it's a DoD purchase, that the price goes way up and the timeline goes way out? Is it because our contracting and we don't force them and we hold their feet to the fire and actually make them give us good product in a timely manner? Or is it some other thing that I'm unaware of?
It's multiple things, right? One, we create a lot of bureaucracy and nightmares, right? So companies have to deal with the clearance process. They have to deal with all these cyber requirements that are often compliance driven, not really security driven. We just require CMMC and all this nonsense. There's a lot of stuff that people have to do business with DoD. Creates a lot of nightmares, right? We also made sure that by doing that, we reduce the ability of other companies to come and compete, so we have less options, which means less competition. So if we have less competitions, people are going to raise the price because they don't care, because they know that, no one else is going to come to undercut the price, right? And usually they know kind of who is pricing what at what price, so then they can align the prices, right? More or less, whether it's direct or not, which is illegal, but I'm sure they find a way to do it anyways. And so you're going to find the defense industrial base really capable of kind of living in the bubble that is the DoD, right? There's a Silicon Valley bubble, but there's also the DoD bubble, right? So that's one piece. There's another piece of how we buy it and how we describe it in the contract, and so it's not agile, it's waterfall. We need 5-year planning and all this nonsense that just compounds a problem, right? We also buy the wrong things, to the wrong people by making it a bloated purchase, right? Someone that's supposed to show up with, a jet with the software on it and the sensors and all the stuff, right? So a bunch of subs. Instead of just buying, if you need good software, you buy it to a software company, right? And then you need a good engine, you're gonna go to an engine. You're not gonna come see me, hopefully. We're pretty stupid, but that's what we do, right? We go to these big companies and say, hey, you're not that good in software, but hey, we're still gonna use you because we want a holistic turnkey solution because we actually don't want to do the work. The fact is the government is either not capable, competent, or willing to do the real hard job of integration, right? Which is what we should do. If you run a company, right? You say you want to create a drone or jet tomorrow. What you would do if you don't want to do all of it and you're a small company, you would start, just like SpaceX did, right? They would go find partners to do pieces of the stuff, but then they would also do a lot internally and learn, and slowly but surely, do more and more themselves to have a control of your supply chain and so on. And then you can decide what you're good at and what you're not good at, right? So the engine, they would go, delegate, and then the software, they would create a pretty massive team, not that big, but very good, competent team, dedicated to do agile software, right? And that's what we don't do, right? We should think as a company. That's why, I was so disruptive, I guess, in the government because of my entrepreneur background, right? You show up, and I just how my brain works. I don't need to think about it. It's just common sense to me. I don't need to think twice. Unfortunately, a lot of the government people have never run a business or understand much about real life outside of DoD, and it just creates this vicious cycle, right? The government people end up leaving, go work for the primes that they gave a bunch of money to, right? So they want a cushy job. They don't want to disrupt too much, right? They don't want to make too much noise. I didn't care. I sold 12 companies. I don't need to work anymore, right? So I could just, sleep all day. I'm not going to do that. I'm 38, but the fact is that gave me the freedom and the ability to be a little bit more noisy compared to what, most people would do, and not care about, hey, I'm going to burn bridges. All these big companies are not going to want to hire me. Well, I don't care because I didn't want to work there anyways. So it's just, but that's part of the cycle, right? Because then they end up working there, and all they know is what they've seen in DoD. So now they're selling more of what they know, and so it's a continuous vicious cycle, right? It's never going to change because you're not bringing fresh air from the outside. And quite honestly, the system is designed to be like that, right? You find the clearance process, and you find, if you look at the SES, Senior Executive Service, which is pretty much like you have to be almost like voted member by 3 other SES, with a secret handshake to become one, with all this special paperwork, right? It's designed to be almost like a cult-like, model. It's not an accident. It's not just like they woke up and they, if you're a CEO or CTO of a publicly traded company, you have less paperwork to do. And I was one of them to do work on the public, market than what you would have to do to become an SES in the government. It just makes no sense. That's designed on purpose. So people, and by the way, you take a massive pay cut, right? so you're going to tell people, hey, you're going to come serve. That's great. But you're going to take a massive pay cut. We're going to give you all this paperwork. You're going to get a clearance. You're going to have to wait months, right? And then you see these special lobbying groups, right? You see, more recently, Eric Schmidt, right, former Google guy, create this foundation, right? And he's literally paying people that are waiting to be appointed. If it takes 7 months, 8 months to be confirmed and stuff like that, they are getting paid, right? The 7 months by the foundation while waiting for the job, right? Which of course, then you go into the government job and you have no conflict of interest, right? You were paid by by a foundation just for fun. They just gave you money because they love you. There was no expectation of anything in return. And that's but all this is designed, right? It's people use the term swamp and stuff. People joke about it, but the fact is, the real people that control the government are the SESs, right? The appointees, people wait them out. I've seen it countless times. People show up and say, hey, you have to do this, right? And everybody stands up. Yes, sir. We do this. And then they wait. Nothing happens. They come back a quarter later. So did it happen? Did you do it? Oh, we're working it, and then they wait time 2 years. The guy is gone, and then they move on, right? Although the whole time, though, the SES is controlling the show, right? Because they are the one, getting the job done. Or at least telling what people to do. So that's the way the system is designed. It's the same in contracting, right?
See, and how is it not that people don't understand exactly what you said previously in this episode of, hey, we're not going to keep up. We're not going to keep up with tomorrow's fight. And people would rather just not do the job because it's more convenient for them. Do they not realize the severity of the reality of losing that fight or not being prepared for it?
I think there's many things, right? I think first, they're one piece of the puzzle, so they feel like, hey, it's not just my responsibility to do all this stuff, so it's like, complacency, we've won for so long, or allegedly won for so long, although if you look back, I'm not sure we won much, we spent a lot, that's for sure. You look at Afghanistan debacle, right? And people get away, with stuff like that. There's no one held accountable, it's kind of a disgrace. And you see that again and again. It's just very scary, right? And both on the military side, the higher the rank, usually the more complacent they become, right? There's exceptions, but they are very rare. Okay, I've worked with everybody, right? And the appointees, they want to make some noise, but they don't want to make too much noise, right? It's very political, right? And then, of course, the carrier CS, well, they really didn't make enough money. I mean, the fact is we're just underpaying these people, right? You're running a 60 billion budget and you're getting paid 180,000 a year. That sounds like a lot for some people, but the fact is, on the commercial side, you will be paid, half a mil, so you take a massive pay cut. You can't get stocks, right? It's just so, the constraint for me and what they did to me, despite approving my stock, then coming back to me and say, hey, you have 24 hours to sell your Microsoft and Amazon stock, and I lost a lot of money to keep the job because they woke up after 4 months in the job and then told me, hey, you need to sell your stock. You have 24 hours to sell it. It's just, you would never see that anywhere else. But I even wonder if it's legal, by the way. But, it's just, and I did, right? And then when I did, they're like, wow, we can't get rid of this guy, right? Because if he's going to lose that kind of money, overnight, that means he's serious about staying, So yeah. I think that was an attempt to kick me out, but didn't work out. But that just tells you, right? The conflict of interest are just massive. The fact that you can literally award a $1 billion contract and then leave the government and go work for the prime you just gave a bunch of money to is kind of reverse kickbacks, right? It's just mind-boggling to me. But that's the world we live in.
That's not supposed.
The complacency is there. It's just you see it all over the place. I think some of people realize, right, how bad it is. Back to your point, right? They just maybe feel like it's not their problem. I don't know.
Well, and I thought that's not supposed to be able to happen. Like I thought all of these checks and balances are into not allow companies to create moats and pretty much non-competes and not allow people to grease the palms of other people and then get jobs from them later. Like, isn't that what all of this bureaucracy was built to stop?
No, it's the opposite, right? Enables? So you can go work for a prime, but you can't come back and sell to the agency. So like someone, let's say you're in the Air Force, right? You sell $1 billion contract to a big prime. You leave the government and go work for the prime. Usually have a 1-year freeze or something like that, where you cannot come back from that prime and come sell to the Air Force. But you can go sell to the Navy, right? So you could still be hired. By the way, you could still be hired and do nothing for a year, right? And I mean, the prime would probably be fine paying you for a year and just wait, right? And you just have a cushy vacation for a year. You just gave them $1 billion, right? So there's nothing that prevents, right, the hiring. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay. Well, I guess that makes sense. So kind of shifting gears. So DevSec, and then if we can explain DevSec and then explain the zero trust, just for people who haven't kind of stayed up on all this stuff.
Yeah, so DevSecOps, development, security, or ops operations is kind of removing the barriers, right, that we see between the development teams, the cyber teams, and the operation teams running, software in production, right? So it's a whole software life cycle is making sure through automation and automated testing, security scanning, and all the stuff we do to make sure software is good and running the way it should and not breaking existing features, so we're not creating, bugs and issues. And through that automation, you get to release software multiple times a day instead of waiting years, right? You get smaller incremental delivery of value, right? That is really bringing tangible outcomes, but small, so you're not breaking big things, right? If you wait 5 years to release, right, you're gonna have this massive software update. It's gonna be a nightmare, right? You're gonna struggle because it's gonna change a lot of things. It's gonna be a massive lift. If you just deliver 20 times a day, small, tiny new things, it's very unlikely it's gonna break something big, right? Particularly because of the automated testing we bring to the table. So you have a lot of automated tests, and so now you're in a situation where you can actually deliver faster without compromising security and safety, right? That's what a SpaceX does when they can do 17,000 build of software a day, 3 hardware in the loop testing a day, and update software hours before the launch, right? Because they know they're not going to break things. And funny enough, the Air Force was initially freezing all launches software update 60 days before launch, allegedly because of safety. So they would say, hey, don't touch the software, 50 days from launch. And so the launches that SpaceX was doing for the Air Force added an older software because of the freeze, which allegedly was created for safety reasons. But the fact is, it was actually making us less safe because SpaceX had fixes that we couldn't have because of the freeze. So the software was less secure and less good because of that 60-day freeze of safety for safety reason. When we removed it, when I was a little frustrated, I was like, this makes no sense. Let's remove it. So we have a parity with commercial, right? Now we have the best of breed, right? But you're not stuck behind 60 days behind. That just shows you, right? People, I mean, if you think about it, right, it's kind of makes sense for someone to say, you know what, we're going to freeze software for 60 days because we want to be safe. We don't want to, let development teams create a bunch of bugs right before launch. He's going to, if something goes wrong, it's probably not good, which on principle makes sense if you don't use DevSecOps and you don't have the ability to automate the deployment of the software on the hardware to test it, see if it's going to behave the same way, see if it's going to be safe, right? If you don't have any of these capabilities, it makes sense. But once you move to the modern software DevSecOps, and you have the ability to test the software on the cloud and then on the hardware, on the real rocket, and you can see, hey, it behaves the same way it should. Now you can actually move faster and be more safe. And so sometimes, again, we create policies and create, bureaucracy, trying to solve a problem, and we make the problem worse.
I feel like that is a common trend, doing something bad with the best intentions. So then now we're talking about zero trust. So what does zero trust mean when we're talking about this, data and networks?
Yeah. So for zero trust is kind of a new, well, not so new. It's 6 years old, right? I've been trying to push it in the government for 6 years. A lot of people felt we were crazy, but now they all embrace it because it's mandated by the president. So now people are like, yeah, we should do this, But zero trust is moving away from the perimeter defense, right? Back in the day, you had a firewall, you had a data center, you had a big wall. Once you get in the wall, you're trusted, right? And so you would use a VPN or something like that to get in the wall, right? The perimeter defense is kind of obsolete now because the fact is you have mobile devices, you have clouds. So there is not just one perimeter, right? You have a bunch of little locations, and the bigger you are, the more locations you have and mobile devices. And if one mobile device is compromised with a malware, now you're in the perimeter, so a malicious actor could get into the crown jewel just by using one device and slowly moving laterally into the network and finding the data and the stuff they want to steal or whatever, right? That's the perimeter defense. That's outdated because of cloud and mobile and all that new, expansion of IT. The zero trust concept is to say nothing is trusted. We're going to assess each device state. We're going to assess the user identity, right? And based on the user identity and the role of the user in the organization and the device being used, if it's a mobile device, if it's a government device, if it's a personal device, based on the risk and the state of the device, if it's patched, right? And based on who you are as a person, we're going to whitelist you access to things in the enterprise cloud or on-premise or wherever it is. So you're allowed to see only what you're supposed to see. So if you're in human resources, you would have access to, maybe some PII, and if you're not, you shouldn't get to see it, right? So it's really granular microsegmentation based on who you are and the device you're using, and it's replacing VPNs. It's still encrypted and all the good stuff, but it's very precise. And for data, you can even go down to the to labeling data down to the cell level. So like the what could be TSSCI, could be secret rel, but the who would be TSSCI. And so based on your clearance and the device you're using, if it's a clear device or not, you would get access to different things, right? So it's very precise. It enables you to flatten the network, so we don't have 20 devices on our desks anymore, right? So all this kind of concept is completely disrupting the cyber world, to move away from the firewall perimeter model.
See, that sounds amazing, and that sounds like something that would be better and create a lot more opportunities to do more with less. Because, like you said, having 3 computers at your desk and you're clicking through one to the next because you're trying to work on different stuff, it's just kind of ridiculous. Can the Air Force do that? I don't want to have little faith in them, but I mean, can they actually roll that out and do it effectively and create this environment? Because it seems like, as somebody who spent 11 years in the military, it seems too good to be true that we would actually get there.
So we can. I mean, technically, it's technically feasible. Now we had, first I created an amazing team to do it, and we did a big chunk of it, for a big chunk of the cloud and software teams, but we were gonna spread it for JADC2, the Joint All Domain Command and Control, and ABMS, to really do flatten the SecRel universe, all the 58 networks of mission partners, all the nations we share data with. Instead of having 58 networks, we could flatten to one. And DevSecDev was very excited about it, and she asked me at the time, with the joint staff J6 to become the CSO also for the joint staff and JADC2, and all we're supposed to get is like 30 mil, to do it, and they couldn't find the money, so that's why I left. I got frustrated a little bit. When we had the MVP lined up, we convinced Microsoft and Amazon to connect their backbone, add Starlink on top of it, add 5G, 5G providers. We even put on the roof of the Pentagon with Preston Dunlap, the former chief architect, of the Air Force and Space Force. So we everything was lined up. It was all gonna get done in 6 months. And then they couldn't find 30 mil. Rounding error for the budget. Something that's supposedly pushed by DevSecDev, right? So you couldn't find. So that's where you're like, really, what's going on here? And it's just very frustrating. In the meantime, the Air Force, with the mission partner office, MPCO, is spending 150 mil to try to do it. And we only need 12 rate to do a flattened cloud, secret rel, 12 million. That's it. To do it in 6 months. Have CENTCOM and PACOM connected to it. Hybrid options. So if the cloud gets bombed, we would have backups on premise. All the good stuff was there. We had the teams lined up, and then unfortunately, even the guy we assigned, Steve Hesselholz, was the CTO at ACC, helping me do the zero trust stuff, and he ended up leaving too because he got so frustrated of not getting the money. So now he's at FDAC. So that's the issue, right? We're losing a lot of the top talent. People get frustrated because you hear the talk, right? Everybody is talking a good game. From the secretary down, right? But nothing happens, and the funding we're asking is rounding error. I mean, it's nobody, just don't do one F-35. I don't care. We can do without an F-35. I promise you, So, but we can't do without software, and we can do without cloud, and we can do without network, and we can do without data, So that's just sad to see,
It seems like it's just weird because, like you said, they're allocating funds elsewhere to the same problem set. Just for whatever reason, they couldn't get those funds to this specific job. I don't know. It doesn't make sense, but sadly, so many things don't make sense.
It's silo within silos. People, those silos are defined very early. Through the Congress acquisition process. It's I mean, let's start also by maybe creating some term limits in Congress. How about that, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the parts that's difficult for the military. And maybe you can speak to this more, is that even the highest levels in the DoD, they don't really have control over their own budget, right? Because it's all allocated to them. So even if what they want to do, sometimes they legitimately don't get that cash, right?
Yeah, but I can tell you, if they really wanted to find 30 mil, they could, right? Dr. Roper,
Yeah.
when we created Platform One, he went to some of the big programs and say, hey, instead of you spending 20 mil a pop to create DevSecOps, we're just going to take the money and we're going to merge it into one program, and we're going to do it for you, And we did it in 90 days, So when people want to do stuff, they can, So if DevSecDef really wanted to find 30 mil, I find it pretty unlikely that we couldn't find it. So I don't know what's going on, but it's just very, very scary. And I think some of the reason for, my take, if you ask me, is because of our acquisition model of the government being the prime and contracting a bunch of companies, including small businesses, but a majority of small businesses because they are better at software, right? And so like, having diversity, like Platform One has 37 companies on contract on the service play, right? So we have diversity of companies, right? We just don't have one big prime. So the prime have less control over what they usually do with the subs, because usually they can control the whole food chain, right? Because they're the prime. In this case, they would be one of the subs, really. And the subs wouldn't be their subs; they would be subs to us. So now we're the prime, and they don't like that, right? So my take is the prime pushed pretty hard to make sure we're not the team picked to do this, so that they can end up back at DISA with a big multi-billion-dollar contract that will never get done, but at least it's back to the business model that they like to see.
Oh, that's so unfortunate. What are some true constraints? Obviously, around just lack of effort, lack of ability. In the DoD, there are obviously some real constraints. Working with classified, working with across bases, all that. What are some true constraints that actually exist that we need to overcome, rather than just lack of effort?
I mean, other than fixing, everything I just talked about, which are constraints, obviously, but we demonstrated that a small group of people can actually get stuff done in the behemoth, that is DoD, and without, so it is doable, right? So I don't think there are any actual hard constraints. We could get anything done, even on the SAP side. I mean, there was no limit. I mean, it just creates more complexity, but it's all doable. I think people feel like, DoD is special and we should have special software. We're not special. I mean, we're special as a mission, right? But software is software, and we're not special in software, and we should just use best of breed, and we should stop creating snowflakes and custom software and stuff we don't need to do. Just piggyback on the open source, commercial, common sense stuff, right? Hire more competent people. We just put these poor, colonels and lieutenant colonels in charge of big programs like cloud and stuff, and they never even manage to run a data center at home, or a small server at home. And then we want them to run the cloud for the largest organization on the planet. How is that going to work? It's like you wouldn't see Google go hire their head of cloud and be like, yeah, we just take someone that's never done cloud before. That just sounds like a good idea. It would never happen, right? We do that. We just randomly appoint people based on being a material leader and some acquisition nonsense to become, the program manager of the cloud and the DevSecOps and, whatever else we do. And then we wonder why there's no expertise, and these people are good, they're good people, right? I'm not blaming the people, but we put them in a very tough position. Now they have to invest money and they have to decide what to do, right? So like ITAS, right? The ITAS is this program that's supposed to move all the network of the Air Force as a service and, connect us to 5G and all that good stuff. It took for 3 years. They were doing risk reduction efforts, trying to see what sticks, because they had no clue. They were just like, I would be like, I just do this. I know exactly what to do because I've done it before. It's just do this. But they wouldn't make decisions because they've never done it before, and for them, it's like, well, we need to have data to pick, and we need to try things out, and like there's nothing to try. It's network. Any company has it. It's not, we're not in the 50s. And yet,
Yeah.
those guys don't have the expertise. So they wouldn't make decisions. So in order not to make a decision, you do pilots and MVPs and tests, and nothing is ever done in production at scale. When you could just, you put me in the job, I do an award right away, and we're up and running in 12 months. 4 years later, they're just starting to do awards now. I mean, it's just, it's ridiculous.
I heard you talking. So we got a chance to be on a webinar not too long ago, and sadly I ran out of time, so I had to leave. But I heard you kind of explaining, it sounded like a vision for the future of the development, where almost what I imagined when I heard you saying it was like a DARPA, but specifically for like software end user interaction. So do you know what I'm talking about? And can you kind of explain what you were talking about there? Cause I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah. So, we invest a lot of money into startups and companies, right? And often these new investments end up in what we call the valley of death, right? They end up not being transitioned between the development stage and the production stage, mostly because we give a bunch of money to companies with programs like AFWorks and SpaceWorks, and DAU is doing stuff, and DARPA is doing stuff, but then it's so built in vacuums and in an environment that's not tied to production with real data and real accreditation requirement for the software to pass the cyber requirements. It's very tough to transition it, right? So they end up dying, and the government is not even helping make introductions to program offices that could potentially want to use it. So it's almost like, we're giving money to companies and then we don't help them go to the next phase. It's like if you're a VC,
Yeah.
right? You're going to invest into startups, and a bunch of companies, you have a great network, but you're not going to make introductions. You're just going to say, I don't want to help you. I just gave you money, but I'm just not going to help you. That's what we do. Literally. It's no joke, and we do that with, $3 billion a year of taxpayer money. And then we wonder why there is no transition. Well, it should be mandated that the government has made at least 5-6 introductions, qualified introductions to program offices, so the companies can transition the stuff. And more importantly, if these people start using DevSecOps from day one, they can release in production multiple times a day with real data, not in a lab, in a vacuum, completely disconnected from the rest of the world. Just common sense, removing the bottlenecks, removing the bureaucracy as much as possible, and streamlining the process for these companies to be in front of customers that want to use a product that we actually help them fund to build. It's you would think it's a monkey would come up with that one, but
Well, and that's what I feel you are exactly right. Is so many companies have that exact problem. They get funding, they maybe get a SIB or two, and then they just kind of sit there and, they're obviously trying to figure stuff out. But the problem is finding more end users is not easily figured out. I mean, most of the reason I know Julian from Crowdbotics is because it was a friend of a friend, and we just text. There was no, hey, you're going to be, get exposure to all these Spark sales and all these Innovation DoD members. They just kind of have to run and gun and ask for favors and do that kind of stuff to meet new people who objectively want the products. They just don't know they exist because there's no good way to kind of communicate across the organizations there. Is there anything I'm missing there? Like, I know there's collider events and stuff like that, but do you see anything getting better or a way that we could do that better in the future?
Yeah, nothing is really getting better, and the collider and all this stuff is not good enough. It's crashing the surface. The answer is simple, right? We should assign a government person that's responsible at least for all the phase twos at minimum, right? For SIBRs, right? Where we assign someone that's responsible for making introductions, right? To at least 5-6 program offices, qualified introductions, be on the call for an hour for each, so 6 hours, for each, and really use their networks to make the right introductions to the right people that would need the product, not just, stupid, unqualified introductions. I'm talking, qualified introductions to the right programs, If you've done something on F-16, you could be introduced to F-22s, B-21, F-35, whatever, right, based on the use case. And for the company to do that is impossible because they don't know who to talk to, right? Most of these people are on LinkedIn. They don't know, who to talk to. So very difficult, right? That's why I'm a big proponent also for like having better way to have that two-way street through LinkedIn and tools like that, right? That's why I'm so active on LinkedIn because, first it's a massive enabler. That's how I got into the government, by the way, just through LinkedIn, reaching out to government people to say, hey, I want to come and help. Can you help me do that? So I wouldn't even have been in the government without LinkedIn. And I sold 2 companies through LinkedIn. I mean, it's just an awesome tool, right? So anybody listening, for your career, it's probably the most important tool ever, and so overall, we need to have that bridge, right? And it has to be a mandated thing, right? When we give people money, so the government ends up doing it and not just pretend, talk about it, So,
well, and I think the incentive structure is just different. Like you said, like a venture capital, their incentive is if they do a really good job and these companies find success, that venture capital is going to become very profitable and then they're going to make money. Where I don't think it doesn't look like that exists in the cyber world. I think there's DIU, but I don't think DIU. I assume the
no, it's
incentive
not the
structures
same.
are different.
NQTel would be more of that, right? They have the investment fund and they're very good at it, right? And then they have the motivation to do it, But the rest of the models are just not. There's no reward for the government, but the reward is there, but the people don't see it. They forget that the reward is, competing and winning against China. That's what it is.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, as kind of the end user, the person who may be doing stuff like that, I see it and I'm like, man, I wish everybody understood and shared my, desire to have a successful venture, if that does happen. So it's unfortunate when we see people who, because again, I understand, at some point it's just a job and you're just doing your job and you're kind of mowing along and just trying to keep it going. But there is a big reward at the end of this if it does happen and we win rather than lose. So.
Well, there's also the issue is that the government people don't always have the network, right? They rotate so often, right? You assign to AFWorks for 2-3 years. How are you going to know all the program offices and where to send people to? There is no mechanism for that, right? So SAFAQ, right, the acquisition side of the house, needs to do better also of having a mechanism, right, for outreach and reaching out to program offices and getting discussions started between teams and program offices. Instead, you have the Defense Acquisition University teaching people that they should not be dependent on any other programs, that they should do everything in the vacuum because they don't want to have a dependency and then not be able to deliver their programs. So you see, PEOs and material leaders and senior material leaders literally educated not to partner with people because if they do and it goes wrong and there's dependencies, right, which is fair because quite honestly, most of the enterprise services created by the government look at this is such a debacle, that no one wants to use it, or it doesn't even work, or it never gets to production. You look at, JEDI and all this nonsense. We did Cloud One in 45 days, and we were able to do $1 billion, of cloud a year. JEDI is still trying to do a contract vehicle. I mean, it's a disgrace. They're still working it. It's been five years. I don't know what, now it's called JWCC. They had to rename it because it was such a debacle. They had to come up with a new name, And then if you ask the leaders at the Defense Digital Service back in the day, not the new ones that are good, but the back in the day guys, that now have a cushy, job in a defense, company, overvalued for no valid reason. These same people tell you that the biggest success of DDS is JEDI. I'm like, if that's a success, I don't know what failure means. This is mind-boggling to me. I can't understand it. I almost had a heart attack when he told me that was his, because I was like, what's your success, for DDS? You've been there for 3 years. I don't see anything coming out that sticks. You do snowflakes. You put a Wi-Fi at the Pentagon that's only usable by DDS. How are you solving the warfighter problems? Giving waivers that are not scalable and not usable in production. How is that a thing? Instead, what I did is fix the policies that were preventing people to get stuff done instead of trying to build snowflakes that don't stick.
Yeah, one, and I've seen exactly that. There were times where I was at a base previously, and we were trying to do exactly what this whole podcast is about, and exactly what you're talking about is shake things up. So we had a scheduling problem. We found that the Google Suite would be the solution because we needed connectivity at work, at home, because we had a lot of people who were working remotely, and you can't get the Google Suite on the network. It's not allowed, but there is a waiver for it. But the only people who get the waiver approved are innovation people because they need it to innovate. But as an end user, I don't have that same authority. I can't get a waiver to say, hey, I need this because it's going to make me better at fighting the fight. Only the people who can get it are the people who are enabling innovation for fighting the fight. And it was so frustrating. And those are the things you look at and you're like, there's no way this is reality, but it is. And so.
Yeah. And, it's actually even more complex than that, right? Because, you could have done it with Office 365. It's very similar capabilities to Google Suite. Some people like one or the other, but that's usually ego driven. It's not, there is no feature difference really. But the fact is when we implemented Office 365, and it's not really Microsoft's fault, we messed it up so bad because of our cyber requirements that we made it not usable outside of the dot, and we made it not work, right? So we created the problem you're facing by implementing a commercial solution wrong. So I actually, where we failed you is we spent billions. I'm actually not a big proponent of allowing people to use G Suite because the fact is we're spending billions on 365. But no, we liked it, right? We picked it, we paid billions, right? Let's fix it and make it work because I use it on the commercial side and I'm just fine with it, and I have no problem. Yeah. And I actually like it better than Google. It's my personal thing, but the fact is it works, we messed it up, right? In DoD, it's not Microsoft's fault. I mean, some of it is, but 90% is DoD nonsense. So we would do the same thing with G Suite, and then we will say, well, we will buy a third product. Well, no, it's just let's fix the mess of 365, which we spend 10 billion on. That's a better outcome for the taxpayer too have to be respected. It's not just about the warfighter, it's also about like, hey, we spend that kind of money, let's fix it,
Well, and that's the problem though. Like we take something, well, do you know what an EFB is? It's so pilots, they fly with iPads now with all of their flight data, all of their stuff. Yeah. What's that?
I'm a pilot.
Oh yeah. What do you fly?
I have a Saratoga, a Piper Saratoga. I'm not a jet pilot, but I'm a normal pilot.
No, but flying's just cool. It's good just getting up there, kind of getting off the ground and getting a better view of things. So they all fly, and the funny thing is it's like in airplanes now there's Garmin's and there's these like glass cockpits. Well, in our jets, we don't have that because we're not dynamic enough. And so we end up having these problems where we're now bringing these EFBs. So it's exactly an iPad. That's what it is. But it is the worst piece of hardware that I had because we call it bricking. Like it would lock and it'd be like, hey, you didn't answer the email fast enough. So yeah. And so it's just comical that they can take something that's as user-friendly as an iPad that my kid who was 18 months old accidentally figured out how to use like that. That's the stuff that we do. We take Microsoft 360 and we make it unusable. And then we take iPads and we make them unusable for safety.
That's why I don't want to buy more stuff, right? I don't want to the answer is not buying more stuff, right? It's to fix the stuff we already bought and mess it up. Otherwise it's too easy, right? People are going to say, I'm going to do whatever with Google, but we're not going to have the cyber stuff that we need at all. Not even any of it, right? There's nothing. There's no cyber, which is dangerous too for the nation. Right. Yeah. And so they completely remove that. So I'm like, no, let's actually fix 365. We spent billions on it. That's what I was working on. Right. And it's just too slow. And then since I left, the momentum kind of died,
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that I've seen, and maybe you can provide some insight, is that I talk to a lot of innovation companies who are doing really cool stuff and they make good on all their contracts, but the DoD just can't onboard fast enough. So the DoD is working in cycles of, they're finishing now the 2024 budget. and they can't wedge you in there because you're not ready to be rolled out yet or whatever as a SIBR 2 going for a SIBR 3. So how are these companies supposed to stay alive while they're trying to fight to take a product that is good, that the end user wants, that they've made well, to get it actually to commercial like rollout? And it's like they can't do it.
Yeah, but that's why also it's very important to have a very big commercial presence. I don't like when companies are too dependent on the government. I like dual use products. So ideally, you would find a product that's dual use. But I get your point. I'm not saying we shouldn't do better. We should. But at the same time, I like that, most companies would have maybe a 70% commercial, 30% DoD. I'm actually very scared when I see companies having, majority of the business coming from SIBRs and DoD. I think that's pretty toxic. It's not a good model, So.
Yeah. Well, and I guess the problem you run into is you have this issue where if the DoD needs a very specific widget, solution that is only, I need you to create F-16 helmet, like water bottle attachments or whatever it is, like you're not going to have a dual use there. So hopefully you have some other thing that's going to get you there.
Yeah, these are very special.
I totally agree.
But that's not the majority, right? I mean, that happens, but I would say it's probably the 30% top. If it's more than that, we have a problem. That means we created a situation where we need snowflakes. And do we really need it? That's always what Elon Musk says, right? He looks back at stuff. He says, we've done it forever, but should we really do it at all? It's not because we've done it forever that's the right way to do it, right?
Yeah. Well, that's, one of the things you just see random stuff with like planes, so F-16s, pretty much all old planes, the G suit, where it pressurizes and it helps you stay awake under G, plugs in on the left. And then in 5th gen, it plugs in on the right. And it's like, did it just conveniently work out that way? Or was it like, you got to buy all new G suits when you start flying 5th gen? You're like, it's a joke.
It's just like, only 4% of the code of F-22s is shared with F-35. I bet it's not an accident.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for being here with us, and tell people how they can get in contact with you if they're trying to reach out.
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, so the easiest way to reach out to me is LinkedIn, and we have the show, in the nick of time, every Tuesday, 1 p.m. Eastern, with amazing guests every week. So join us and come learn more about tech and acquisition and culture and all the good stuff.
Yeah, awesome. Well, everybody, how to reach me, and we're getting out of here. Thanks.
Thanks.